There's a moment you keep going back to. Maybe it was an argument. You said something you didn't mean, or maybe you meant it. And that's the part that scares you. Your voice got louder than you wanted. Your face did something you couldn't control. And the moment it was over, something in you went cold. Or maybe it wasn't anger. Maybe it was silence. You saw someone. You wanted to say something. And instead, you stood there, frozen, while the moment passed right through you like you were made of glass. It doesn't matter how long ago it happened. It could have been a year. It could have been this morning. Because your brain doesn't care about time. It only cares about the loop. So it plays it back again and again. Slightly worse each time. And then, maybe you've noticed this, you start rehearsing. You have the conversation in your head. You say the right thing this time. You stand tall. You don't freeze. You don't explode. You finally get it right. And then you catch yourself doing it and you think, what is wrong with me? I want to tell you something before we go any further. Something I wish someone had told me when I was deep in that loop. You are not broken. You're not going crazy. But something is happening inside your mind that almost nobody explains properly. And until you understand what it is, and more importantly, what it means about you, you will keep returning to that room, that moment, that version of yourself you cannot seem to forgive. This video is about that room, and it's about a way out, not a motivational speech, not a technique, but a genuine shift in how you see what happened, one that changed something for me. And I think it will do the same for you. What your brain is doing has a name. It's called rumination. And in the clinical sense, it means the mind has locked onto a negative experience and is replaying it involuntarily, repeatedly, and each time it replays, the emotional weight doesn't get lighter. It gets heavier. Here's what makes it feel so cruel. Your brain isn't malfunctioning when it does this. It's protecting you. The mechanism goes back thousands of years. The mind replays threatening experiences because it's trying to extract a lesson, trying to make sure that next time you survive. The problem is, your brain cannot always tell the difference between a physical threat and a social one. Being rejected, embarrassing yourself, losing control in front of someone you respect, to a very old, very primal part of your mind that registers as danger. So it keeps the file open. It keeps reviewing it, looking for the mistake so it can be prevented from happening again. That's why you rehearse. The imaginary conversations, the things you should have said. That's not madness. That's your brain trying to rewrite the outcome, trying to feel safe. But it has gone past the point of being useful. And I know this, not just because I've read about it. I know it because I've sat in that loop myself. I've replayed moments from years ago at 2 a.m. like they just happened an hour before. I've had full conversations with people who will never hear a single word. I know exactly what it feels like to be trapped inside a room that only exists in your own head. What finally helped me wasn't a technique. It wasn't a breathing exercise or a journal prompt or someone telling me to let it go. It was an analogy, a simple one. One I keep coming back to, even now. Think about the clothes you wore as a child. Not any specific outfit, just the idea of them, the size of them, how they fit a version of you that no longer exists. Now imagine picking up one of those old shirts, something you wore at 7 or 8 years old, and trying to put it on today. It won't fit. Your shoulders are wider, your arms are longer. You are a different size than you were then, and no amount of forcing will change that. If you tried to wear those clothes, they wouldn't just look wrong. They'd cut into you. They'd restrict you. They'd hurt. And here's the thing. You don't feel guilty about that. You don't stand in front of the mirror with that tiny shirt and think, I should be able to fit into this. What's wrong with me? You just accept it. You outgrew it. That's what growing does. It changes your size, and when your size changes, some things no longer fit. That's not failure. That's evidence of growth. Now stay with me here. Because This is the part that shifted something for me. When we keep replaying a past version of ourselves, when we return again and again to the moment we exploded or froze or failed, we are picking up those childhood clothes and trying to force them back on. We are returning to a size we no longer are and punishing ourselves for the discomfort of it. Think about what that actually means. The shame you feel when you replay that argument. That shame only exists because you now know better. A person who genuinely doesn't care, causes harm, and feels nothing. The fact that it haunts you, the fact that you cringe, the fact that you do it differently, that is not evidence of how bad you were. That is evidence of how much you have already grown past it. The version of you who froze in front of that girl was operating at the capacity he had in that moment, with the confidence he had, with the self-belief he had. The only reason you know you could have done something different is that you have grown since then. You are not the child. You just keep picking up the clothes. And I say this as someone who still catches himself reaching for them. Someone who has had to deliberately set them down and remind himself, these are not my size anymore. They haven't been for a long time. There's a quote I keep returning to. It's often attributed to Alan Watts, a philosopher who spent his life translating Eastern wisdom into language the Western mind could actually receive. The quote is almost uncomfortably simple. You are under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago. 5 minutes, not 5 years. 5 minutes. What Watts understood, and what modern psychology is only beginning to articulate properly, is that identity is not a fixed thing. The self is not a monument. It is a process, a living, breathing process of becoming. Every honest moment of self-examination, every decision to do better, every time you sit with the discomfort of who you were instead of running from it, these things change you neurologically, structurally. You are not the same person you were before this reflection began. So when you replay that moment, when you sit in the shame of who you were in that argument, that silence, that failure, you are holding yourself to a person who no longer fully exists. That is not permission to avoid consequences. Outgrowing your old self doesn't mean you don't show up for what that self created. It means you stop wearing the old clothes as punishment. You stop putting them on every morning and suffocating in them to prove you feel bad enough. You feel bad enough. That is already proven. The question now is, what do you put on instead? I want to be honest with you. You will make mistakes again. Not because you're broken, but because growth has never moved in a straight line for anyone. There will be another moment where the anger gets too loud or the fear gets too heavy, and you'll act from a version of yourself you thought you'd left behind. And when that happens, the loop will try to start again. When it does, remember the close. Not to excuse what happened, but to locate yourself accurately. To ask, is the person reflecting on this moment the same person who was in it? The answer will almost always be no. Because reflection itself is the proof of distance. The very fact that you are watching this, sitting with this, willing to look at the parts of yourself that shame you, that is not the behavior of someone who hasn't grown. That is the behavior of someone who is actively becoming. You have always had the right to choose what you wear. The old clothes are not your size anymore. Put them down.